in regards to what we plan to do. So something which allows us access to a parent entity and a child entity. And in order to see where we were, we'll have to run everything. So let's just run the server. The server is going to be run like this. And let's just run our front end. And our front end is going to be run like this, npm start. We could have run our server with npm start, but we would have had to add something to the, let's just do this actually. So we have something homogeneous. So the only difference is going to be that in our package JSON, we're going to need a script for start, which in our case is going to be really basic. So it's going to be Node server.js. So this is how generally how Node.js projects are going to behave. I'm going to run npm install to install stuff, and then I'm going to run npm start to start the project. So npm start. So we're started, and npm start for the front end. And the front end is actually going to open a browser window. We're going to see it shortly. Alrighty-o. Let me just see where it opens it. It's here. And we have this simple app which was developed last. And we stopped at the fact that our, let's see if this works. No, it doesn't. So something authors. Does this work? No, it's an error. Let's see what the problem was. Well, there shouldn't be any problem. Oh, first off, let's issue this problem altogether and replace our backend with the backend, the more advanced backend we've developed, the one which has a dependent entity and a main entity, because at this point we actually have a really simple server. Right? It's something which just does this, and we actually want our more complex backend, which is the one that handles authors and messages, and it's this stuff. Right, we've actually gone through it in the tutorials, and we've gone through it in the course. So it's something which has an author and a message. I don't particularly know what error we have now, but this should suffice. And if we change anything in author, we might want to load it dynamically with nodemon. But for now, just npm start. Okay, and this gives me an error. Yeah, this is because we don't have a dependency, so npm install course --save. Now, course actually is cross-origin resource sharing, and the idea here is that when I make a request from a server to a different server, by default, they're going to refuse me. And in order for them to not refuse me, they're going to add a series of headers. And the headers are basically explanatory. It's they're headers which say it allows something cross-origin. So it's allow origin, which server they allow it from, allow method, which methods they're supposed to allow, and allow headers, which headers they're supposed to allow. We can do this manually without any significant trouble. We just didn't have the dependency. But we have a middleware, which we've used here. Let me just see it. We actually have a middleware, which is this one. Course, which comes from a package called course, and this is going to handle it for us. Okay, so our server worked now. Let's just go to the React app, and now it works. Right, and the stage at which we were is that we have this warning which we're going to eliminate shortly, but the stage was this. Right, nothing is done here. So let's first do this part. Okay, let me just go to our React app. So first, let's check our store and see if our store supports editing and deleting a particular record, and it doesn't. So let's do here. Let's say delete one of an ID and save one of an ID. Now, save one doesn't work with just an ID. It has to have a new version of the entity, so it's going to be save one of an ID and author. And these are going to be reasonably basic. So delete one is going to be Axios delete of, and the address is going to be server/authors/the ID. And the logic is going to be similar to what we see here. So it's if we manage to do it, we're going to reload the state. If we don't manage to do it, we're just going to write an error. As for save one, well, save one is again going to be Axios put. The URL is going to look similar to this one because I can't edit something which I haven't specified. And the difference is going to be that I'm going to have a message body, which is going to be the author. And again, if I manage to do it, I'm going to reload the state. And if I don't, I'm going to just console warn an error. All right, it's reasonably clear. Now, if I go to author list, which is the place in which I'm doing all these operations, let's add some functions for them. So it's going to be delete author, of ID, which is going to be store delete one of ID, and save author of ID and author, which is going to be store dot save one of ID and author. All right. Okay. So now, who knows how to save an author and how to delete an author? Who's going to do the actual operation for saving and deleting an author? Well, a row, right? If I go on a particular row, I'm going to have a little button which is going to say delete me, basically, delete the current row. Save, again, somehow the row has to handle the saving because I'm editing a particular author and then I want to save it. So let's look at our rows. Our rows are going to be these author things. Now let's first eliminate that warning. The warning, which we got in the console, was the fact that whenever I do a map, whenever I create a list of things, the things must have a key, which a key is a unique ID. And incidentally, I actually have something which is good for a key, which is author.id. But apart from this, in order to finish doing my job was in the author list job, I'm going to want to send to each author a mechanism which they can call if they want to save or delete something. So I'm going to say on delete. Let's just wrap this. Right, so on delete is going to be delete author, and on save is going to be save author. And from this point onward, it's up to the author itself to handle the actual mechanism of saving and deleting. Right, so let's go to author. Now, author actually has this view state, which is reasonably complete, and has this edit state, which is nothing. It says nothing in it. Now, if I want to delete something, most likely I'm going to want to do it from the view state. So let's add a button here, and it's going to be input type button, value delete, on click. And again, I'm going to call the method which I've received through properties from my parent. Right, this is similar to what we've done in. No, it's not similar to anything. Well, let's discuss it then. We've not written that yet. So what's going to happen here is if I said something, where can I get? First of all, where can I get the logic from? Well, if I look at author list, it's been sent to me through the onDelete property. Right, so my first instinct would be to see something like this.props.onDelete. However, this is not going to work Because onClick expects a function which is a function of event. Right? It's going to automatically send event as a parameter to that one. And what I want here is to actually call a function of a particular ID. So what I have to do is this. Right? So I'm going to send the function of event, although I'm going to ignore it. And inside it, I'm actually going to call this props on delete. And this is going to be this props on delete of this props author ID. Let's just close our input, and this should handle the delete part. But before we continue, because I figured we've missed something, let's move this part in a form. Right? Let's have a separate component, which is going to be called author form. And let's see how we go about that. Well, first of all, we're going to create a file, which is going to be author form. And this is going to be a basic component. We can actually take a pre-existing component and adapt it. Let's just take app. Right, and let's see what applies and what does not apply. So my component, in its most basic form, is going to be this. All right, so a form. This does not apply. My component is going to have a particular name, so author form, and it's going to export itself. All right. Now, as for the actual shape of my component, I'm going to just take what I'm supposed to move there, this part. And let's see what happens, right? So if we go to author form, we're going to replace the form with a form, with an actual form. Okay, so this doesn't quite make sense, right? Let's see why it doesn't make sense. Well, I'm missing some parts. First of all, the handle change bit. Right? I'm missing the handle change bit. Second of all, the handle change function actually copies in the property called this, like this, right? It's going to copy the actual value of the input. So let's look where we can get these from. So if we look at the constructor for author list, the constructor is going to look similar to this one. All right, so let's take the constructor. It's not going to have authors. However, it's going to have an author name and an author email, and it's going to have my handle change. Okay, now when I click something, well, I no longer have the actual logic for adding something. I'm supposed to get it from my parent. And let's call it on add. Right, so if I go to author list, some of this stuff will not apply anymore. So the author list doesn't need these things anymore. Right, because it no longer has them, nor does it need the handle change bit. What it does need, though, is a form. Right, so it's going to be author form. And it needs to send to the form something to handle the add logic. Right, and we're going to say on add is actually add author. And we're left with only one error, presumably, which is the fact that we've not imported author form. We don't actually have it. So we're going to say import author form from /author form. All right. Let's see if it still works, or if it doesn't work, what doesn't work? Well, on add is not defined. Okay. This is in author form. No, not this one. One sec. Right. So author form at line 22. Is this thing. So on click is on add. Well, we don't have on add. What we have is the function which we receive through the property. So it's this.props.onAdd. Right? It's from my properties on add. Okay, so let's see if it now works. It seems to work. Let's just test it. So some name at a.com. Right, and it still works. And whenever I get, let's say I'm writing a particular component, whenever I get to a part which seems to be too complicated, I can extract it in a different component, and you see it's reasonably easy to just move it to a different component. Now let's get back to our original concern, which was that in author, we wanted to have the edit bit. Now in order to have the edit thing, we're going to leave this button. This button is all right. But we're going to be supported, so this is not all right. And we're going to have a series of things. So first of all, we need some inputs. So an input type text, which is going to be named author name, and is going to, on change, is going to do the handle change. Now, how will the handle change look? Just like the last time, right? So we're just going to copy paste it from there. But we have to call it here. The reason why we can just write on change is handle change, because handle change is actually an event handler, right? It's a function of event, and it deals in terms of event. Let's just copy paste it so we don't, right? So it's going to be this. It's an event handler. Okay. Well, let's just use it in author. We're going to use the same gimmick, so we're just going to declare it on the constructor so we don't have to manually bind it. Right, so we have handle change. Now the second thing is going to be something with name author email. Now, since they're going to be displayed one under the other, we're supposing that we don't actually have to write what they are, because their position is going to give away their purpose. Right? It's going to be easy to understand which one is which. Okay, so we have this, and we need a button, and the button is going to be our save button. Let's do our save button. So it's going to be input type button. Value is save, and when we click it, we're going to just call the function we've got from our parent, which is the onSave method. Right, so anonymous function which calls onSave. So this props onSave, and this onSave thing is going to want to receive an ID and a new form for the author. So it's going to be this props author ID, just like for delete, and an author, just like for add. Right? Because it's the same logic. We have to have something which has a name, which is going to be this.state.author name, and an email, which we've already saved in this.state.author email. Right, and if I look at the author form, it's the same shape of the function. The difference between onAdd and onSave is that for onSave, we're going to first send an ID, because we're actually overwriting something existent instead of creating something new. Now let's see if this, oh, we forgot to actually close the tag. Let's see, it's in here. Right, this one has to be closed. Handle change. Now, the problem, what we forgot to do, is that handle change is actually defined on our component. So it's not handle change in the global sense, but it's rather this.handle change. Okay. So right now it's reloaded. We've not tested anything, I think. So let's delete something. Now let's edit something. Now we're not really satisfied with the way this works, right? Because it doesn't show us what we've written here. We're going to modify it shortly. So some test. But let's just see that it works. It actually works. However, what's happened is that it's not actually switching state, right? So we have to fix that too. It should switch states to give us some feedback, because I click save and I have no feedback that it's actually saved. So first off, let's go to our source. First off, we have to start from an initial value of these properties. Let's go to author. Oh, no, we forgot more than one thing. So it's first of all, the state should have an author name, which starts from this props author name, which is the initial value. Because we've received each author tag receives an author to display. This is the initial author we've received, and author email. All right. So let's see if this works. So if we give edit right now, no. All right. Let's check out what's happened. So let's first check our properties. It's author, okay. Why is it not updating? Okay. Let's check it out first. No, it's not updating. On changes, this handle change. All right. Let's treat this as an opportunity. One sec. There are props called author name, author email. All right. And first off, because we're going to update it, let's add something more and we'll test it, which is that whenever the components from the parent change, we're going to copy them in our state. One sec. No. Let's do this. Component will receive props of next props. And let's change our state. So it's going to say, for now, it's going to say this dot set state. It's going to be is editing false. But why doesn't it do this though? Because it does this, but it doesn't populate those things. Oh, okay. That's because we're not actually populating our inputs, right? Input text have as initial value something called in value, and it's going to be this dot state dot author name. We got them in our state, but we're actually not displaying them. And value is this dot state dot author email. Right, so let's check it out again. This time it should work, and it does. I just forgot something. Any questions? Is it reasonably clear? Now let's go forward then, and let's add our messages, right? And the way it's going to work is that we're going to have a button on each author, which is going to say details. And we click the details, and when we click the details, there's some logic done. And it's going to show our author details, which in our case are the messages. Now there's two ways of going about this. One of them would be to just have a component, to have a master detail, right? When I click on the author, I just show the messages. But what we're going to do is actually have a different state, right? So I can go from my author state to my author detail state, which is going to be something of a higher level, right? These two different states are going to apply to author list. An author list is either going to be in the mode in which it displays details, or in the mode in which it displays the whole list of things. Okay, so first off, let's go to our author and have a button. We're assuming we can only go to details from the view state. Right? So we're going to have an input type button. Value is details. And on click on details, we're going to do something which was sent by our parent, which let's call it on select. Right, and this is on select of this, probably of this props author ID, because I select a particular author. Right. So from our perspective, we've done our job. Right. This is all we were supposed to do. Now it's up to our parent to handle the display part. So let's go to our parent, which is going to be author list. Okay. So in author list, we need this on select thing. So let's just say here, we're going to say on select is going to be something, select author. And the select author, we're going to declare here. So we're going to say, we're actually, since we wanted to have access to this, we're going to declare it here. So we're going to say this dot select author is going to be an arrow function of ID. Okay, so let's see how we'll do that. Well, first off, we'd want to have a selected author in the store. Right, so if we go to the author store, we're going to have this dot selected is going to be this bit. Now we might select the author just from our list, or we might select the author involving something on the server. Let's assume that we might get something else from the server. So let's add a method here, which is going to be get1 of ID. And this is going to be, it's going to go to a URL which looks like this. What is going to be get axios.get, so axios, just axios. It's going to get this thing, and then with the response, it's going to be do something really similar to what we've done for get all. So it's going to be this dot selected is response.data, and we're going to send a different event. So this dot emitter dot emit single author load. Right, so it sort of looks like the get all bit. It's just that it requests one author instead of requesting more than one. And the catch is going to be, for now, just our generic catch logic. All right, so if we go back to author list now, we can say that select author is going to be store.get1 of ID. And then we have to wonder if we've received the single author load event. So emitter, I think it's called like that. Let's just check it out. Emitter, right? So add listener on single author load. And this is going to say is this.setState, and we're going to store in the state first of all the selected thing and just the ID. So we're going to say selected store selected, and the ID, let's say we're going to store in details for. So details for ID. Now if I didn't want to go to the server, I'd just store the ID. I wouldn't do any requests, I wouldn't do anything else. Right, so if we look at our state, we're probably going to need an object which is going to be selected. And the details for, which is going to contain an index, or if I haven't selected anything, it's going to be -1. Because we have 0, authors of 0 exist. So we're just going to call it -1. Okay, so we have this thing. However, it has no consequences. So in order for it to have consequences, we should add something which changes the behavior of this component when details for is different from -1. Right. So this part is still true, but it's true only in the event that details for is -1. So we're going to say if this.state.details for is -1. No, sorry. We're going to return this. It's the same logic. Else, let's say first off we're going to just do something temporary, which is going to say not supported under construction, etc. So now our select should work, although it does nothing. Select author. Okay, most likely we've forgotten this. Yes, it's this.select author. Right. Not supported. So it selected it, but nothing happened. So let's have something happen. Right, because that's the logic of it. Well, we're going to have a separate component, so we don't overload the code here. And let's call it author details. And let's say it's author details for this state selected. Obviously, this component doesn't exist yet, but let's import it anyway. Because if we go by our naming logic, we know how it will look. All right. So now let's create author details and give it its own little logic. So author details.js, and at least initially, this is going to be a relatively basic component. So let's do that. Let's go to, say, app. Take this as a template. And this bit is not going to apply. Our component is going to be called author details. Okay. And for now, we're just going to say something like I am, let's write it in a header. All right, so H3. So I am this props author name, right? Okay. So this is this should reflect in our. Oh, sorry, we've forgotten something, which is the export detail, export default author detail. Right. So I am somebody. Well, what I should see though is I want to see the actual details. So the dependent entity is for my parent entity. So in this case, the message is for my particular author, right? Okay, so let's start with message store. We need something which handles messages. So let's create a message store. And this is going to be really similar to our author store. So let's just modify this one. So it's just going to be class message store. It's going to export message store. Okay, again, it's going to receive an emitter. Just make this a bit tighter. Right, so it's going to receive an emitter. It's going to have a content which is going to be a list of messages. It's probably not going to have selected because I'm not going to have message details since messages don't have any dependent things. So this part is not going to be relevant. Now, get all. Now, get all doesn't work like that for messages because it's get all the messages for a particular author. So it's get all of author ID. Now, this is going to mean that it's Axios, so Axios.get basically, server/authors / author ID. Then I get a response. I save it in the content, so right. And let's say that we're going to broadcast message load. Okay, now create one. All right, create one is going to be URL is going to be necessarily no. I've forgotten something. It's /messages because that's how it actually looks on the back end. Now for create one, the URL is going to be similar to this one, right? Just like in our server. So you're going to post to author ID messages a message which we should have received as a parameter. However, this is not going to work unless we also receive an author ID, okay, because we need it from somewhere. And the get all is not going to make sense unless we give it the author ID. Now delete one. Now delete one, again, is going to be similar, but we're going to need both an author ID and the message ID. So it's delete server/authors. It's this thing, this URL, /message ID. Okay, and the get all is going to be of author ID. Now for save one, we're going to receive this get one isn't going to apply. So this one we can delete. But for save one, we're going to receive a author ID, a message ID, and the message. Our URL is going to look like this one. And we're going to send the message inside the actual request. And this is going to be get all of author ID. So this is our store. All right. So what we need now is to go to author details and transform it into a list of messages with all the operations. So let's go to message, to author details. This is actually going to be a message list. So let's say we have a div, and inside this div, we're going to presumably display a list of messages. Now, we don't actually have the list of messages declared yet. So let's go to our constructor and say this.state is actually contains actually a key called messages, which is going to start from an empty thing. All right. Now the idea will be similar to what we've done for author, which is that when we've attached the component to the tree, we're going to populate the state with something, and it's going to automatically update. So for component did mount, we're going to say store. Well, we don't have the store yet, so let's do this. Let's create our store. So we're going to say first we need FB emitter. So import event emitter from FB emitter. Then we need our store. So import message store from /stores/message store. So we can now create our store. So const ee is new. Let's just call it emitter actually. Event emitter. And message store, let's say store is new message store of emitter. So we can now do something similar, which is say store.getAll. Well, store.getAll. However, store.getAll of what? Right. Now, and if we look at author details, let's look at author details, the inclusion of author details, which is in author desk. Right, we've actually given the author here. So we have the ID in this props author ID. So get all of this props author ID. Now when they get it, right, we're going to say emitter dot add listener of message load. We're just going to update our state. So this dot set state, right, and this is going to be messages store.content. So we now have our messages, and we might display them. I don't have a clear idea if I already have messages in the database, so let's leave it for now, and we'll test it a bit later, because we can't actually add messages unless we do it manually for now. Okay, so this should populate our messages. All right, what might we need? What more might we need? Well, we might need a series of methods or functions, but we'll represent them as methods because it's going to be easier, which are going to handle operations of messages. Because we have the idea of saving a message, the idea of deleting a message, and the idea of creating a message. Right, so let's just write them here. So it's going to be this.delete message of message ID. And actually, I can hide the idea of an author from here. So I'm going to say store.delete1 of this props author ID and message ID. Right, so the message itself is not going to be aware that it's on a particular author. Okay, this dot let's have some logic to this. So how is it called here? It's add author. So add message is something of message and it does store dot create one of this props author ID and message. And save message is going to do store dot save one of author ID, message ID, which would have had to send here, message ID and message. All right. So we need these things. Now all that's left is to create a similar structure. So this is going to be my actual details part, and it's going to contain a list of messages, just like before, and something which allows me to add message. So let's just group them in their own little divs. So first off, we're going to have these are my messages. Just mark it somehow, so let's do it as an H4. And it's going to be similar to what we've already seen, so it's this state messages map. And for each message, we're going to actually create a message component. We're going to put it in a separate message component. So it's going to be message. And if we think about the logic which we have written earlier, this should probably receive the delete part and the save part, because only a row knows how to save or delete. So on delete is going to be this dot delete message. One sec, let's make it a bit more visible. And on save is going to be this dot save message. Make sense? So it's the same logic as before. Right, and this is going to be my form. Let's just put it in its own little div. And let's say, again, H4. Let me just add another one. And here we're going to have a separate component, which is going to be message form, which should probably receive something to tell it how to add the message. All right. So right now it's broken because we're missing this component and this component. Let's just import them. We're going to create them shortly. But if we create them in the same fashion, we're probably going to import them like this. So message form, again, from message form. So we're left with these particular components. So let's just add them in via modifying stuff. So let's create message. And this is going to be similar to what we've seen for an author. Right, so let's just start from the author. And let's see what's going to be different. Right. Okay, so this obviously is going to be a message. It's going to export a message. Now, messages in our particular logic have message titles and message contents. So this is going to be message title and message content. And they're going to go from the props, so it's going to be this props message title, as well as this props message content. The handle change bit is going to be the same. And here we're going to have this props message title, this props message content. The edit button is going to be the same. The delete button is going to be the same. It's just going to send the message ID. Select is not applicable. Here, well, it's message title, and it's going to be this state message title. This is message content. And it's going to be message content. On click, the cancel button is going to be just the same, while the save button is going to have to send a message, which is going to be in this props message ID. Name doesn't apply, so its title is the state message title. And content is this state message content. Right, so this should be all right. Let's see what doesn't work. Can't resolve message form. Right, it's passed through message for our first component. And now we need the message form component. So let's create a message form component. This is going to be similar to author form. Let's take author form and modify it, so it's going to be message form. Export message form. Our particular state is going to be is going to contain message title and message content. Our handle change is going to be the same thing. Okay, so message title, message content, and here we're going to say on click we're going to do add of message title in title and message content in content. Okay, so let's see if this works. Yeah, we've written a link wrong. Right, so if you look at the also details, stores is actually here. Right, so if we go on details, we can add a message, new message. We've written that part wrong. New content. That works. Modified content. That works. Delete. All right. So all that's wrong about this is that you should have here title and content. So I think this is about it. Okay. auth details. Oh, we might try to actually have a sort of back button. So let's create a sort of back button. This is going to be input type button, and it's going to say value clear selection. Right. And it's going to do on click, it's going to actually do something. Let's call it, we don't have it yet, but let's call it this props unselect. Just going to call it this props unselect. Right, because we have to bring our parent to the state where there's nothing selected. And if we look at our parent is going to be auth list. Okay, so this dot unselect is going to be something which just does set state of minus, set details for -1. So this dot set state details for -1. Let's see if that works. So how did we call it? Oh, unselect. Okay. Let's just call it on unselect, which is going to be this unselect. And here we're going to say this props on unselect. All right. So let's just go here, details, clear selection. And we've missed something, which is we have this warning, which comes from the fact that when we did an array of messages, we forgot to say key is am.id. .id. All right. Do you have any questions? Let me just stop the recording.